So we know that emission spectra are caused by getting an electron in an excited state and allowing it to fall down from a more excited state to a less excited state. And what happens in that transition is that an amount of energy is emitted in the form of EM waves, and it abides by that relationship there. So every particular energy gap corresponds to a particular wavelength, right? Or it could be E equals HF, so it's directly proportional to the frequency. But basically, energy corresponds to a very particular type of light. Now, these gaps will correspond perfectly to a particular element, and only these processes, only these gaps, only this pattern of gaps is identifiable as a particular element. They're like unique to said element. Absorption spectra is the other way around, as we said in the last video. Each one of those gaps, like this one for example, you can reverse the orders of everything. So if an exact 410 nanometer wave interacted with this electron in the ground state, well actually it's n equals 2 state, it would lift it up to the n equals 6 state. If a 434 nanometer wave interacted with an electron in the n equals 2 state, it would jump it up to the n equals 5 state. Anything in between those two will just pass straight through. So it only filters out the 410, the 434, the 486, and the 656, and then any other combination in between as well. But those combinations are very specific to the energy levels, right? And what you get is a pattern like that of missing waves because they've been scattered by the fact that they've been absorbed by these elements in particular. So once again, you can correspond each energy to a particular wavelength, and instead of it being a de-excited electron or a transition from high to low, it is exciting an electron or promoting an electron, as they say in chemistry, from low to high. Easy. So a photon comes in. If it has the exact right energy, it will be absorbed in lifting an electron. The good thing about it is when that electron falls back down, it very, very, very unlikelily emits the light in exactly the same direction it came in. It'll most likely send it in any one of the many other options that it can send it in, and that means that the intensity is reduced in the given direction. It's important. Right. So, looking at the light from stars can give us loads of information about the substances that those stars are made of and what they're surrounded by. Only problem with this is the effect of the relative motion between the observer and the observed, and most notably the Doppler effect is what causes that. So I'm sure you're aware of the Doppler effect. It's basically that effect, or the that one. Basically, if you're looking or if you're observing something which is emitting light or sound and it's coming towards you, it's emitting its next wave at a position closer to you than the last time it was emitting a wavefront. So what the effect of that is to bunch up the waves and reduce the wavelength or increase the frequency of those waves, resulting in a more high-pitched sound, like a that's the high-pitched bit, or a more high-energy light, which would be more toward the blue side of the spectrum of light colours. Roy G. Biv, more toward the blue, indigo, violet side. If you're behind something and it's moving away from you, it's emitting its next wavefront at a location further away from you than it was the previous time. So it gives the illusion, it does physically stretches the wave that you're receiving and increases the wavelength and reduces the frequency, which means that you get a lower sound or a lower energy light, and that usually means that it's being shifted into the red section of EM light, and that's why it's called red shifting or blue shifting. That's the Doppler effect. Right. However, that relative motion is the same for all the different wavelengths of light. So the star and like the Earth and a distant star move relatively the same. It doesn't matter what different light frequency you are, it will be affected the same way. So the pattern, that unique pattern of different gaps, will be preserved. It'll just be in a new location, right? And so this is how the spectra looks. So at rest, this is the normal spectra of, let's say, hydrogen, which probably not, but there you go, it's a normal spectrum of hydrogen. If it's moving towards you, all these things have been shifted towards the blue side, but the pattern is still unique to a particular element. And if it's moving away from you, it's been shifted towards the red side, but the pattern is still unique to the element. That's important. So diffraction gratings. This is our way of taking light that comes from a star and turning it into a big spectra like that. And the way we do that is to use a diffraction grating. And what a diffraction grating does is it takes advantage of the property of light to diffract by different angles depending on its wavelength. Right, so different wavelengths of light, of which white light is made up of many, many, many different wavelengths. All of them will be dispersed, diffracted by a different amount depending on that wavelength. And it works according to the rule d sine theta equals n lambda, where d is the size of the grating, which is the space between one slit and the next slit, which is causing the light to spread, where theta is the angle of that diffraction, where n is whether it's the first, second or third appearance of that wave colour. So what happens in a diffraction line is that you'll notice here, where's my thing? You've got as anything that's going straight on, we call that the 0th order. And then you'll notice that there's a blue there, we'll call that the first blue, or we'll call it the first order blue, and we set n equals 1 for that condition. Then it reappears over here, and we'll call that the second order blue. And then it reappears over here, and we'll call that the third order blue. So it's the first time that that particular wavelength appears, right? Yeah, so n equals 1 if it's the first, 2 if it's the second, 3 if it's the third, etc., etc., etc. And then lambda is the wavelength. So the greater the lambda, the greater the value of sine theta. Right, there you go. So, yeah, if you've not covered the wave topics yet, then you'll just have to be familiar with that. You won't be familiar with that, but you'll just have to accept it. And yeah, like I've just said. So, by using a known diffraction grating of known separation, and by choosing the first order or a known order, we can just measure the angle theta and we can determine the wavelength of the light, which is useful for us then to be able to put together a spectra and identify the exact value of each wavelength, right? We can then identify which element has caused that particular spectra, and we can effectively filter out that particular pattern from what will no doubt be a mess of lots of other overlapping patterns. But it is possible to pull out the right pattern and identify it. Right, so now we're on to Wien's displacement law, which is an interesting thing, which is looking at the sort of the peak wavelengths, or the sort of wavelengths you get from the light of stars themselves. So first thing we do is just look at what it actually looks like, and that is this. That the wavelength of light coming from stars is not a constant value. For example, a star of 3000 Kelvin, it's emitting wavelengths all the way from about 5 micrometers all the way up to, well, potentially higher than 3 micrometers. 0.5 micrometers, I should have said at the beginning there. All the way from 0.5 micrometers to in a like more than 3 micrometers. And you'll notice, if we look at the intensity that it emits at 3000 Kelvin is quite low. If we increase the temperature, we bring in lower wavelengths or higher frequencies, higher energy at lower wavelengths. So lower wavelengths of light and a more broad curve which encompasses lower peak value and at a higher intensity. And as we go up the temperature, we see this trend continue, that the peak value of lambda, or the peak wavelength, goes further down, making more higher energy, and the curve rises up, becomes a lot more encompassing, and increases the intensity. You can see that the difference between 3000 and 4000 is a huge change in lambda, whereas in 4000 and 5000 it's a much smaller change in lambda, but a bigger change in intensity. And then once again, between 5000 and 6000, the same change in temperature represents a much smaller than before change in the max lambda, but a huge change in the intensity. And this leads to Wien's displacement law, which is that lambda max, the peak wavelength emitted from any substance at a temperature T, is inversely proportional to that temperature T. And if the constant of that inversely proportional relationship, B, is called Wien's constant, where B equals 2.9 times 10 to the minus 3 meters Kelvin. It's an interesting little rule, that. And that trend will continue on, with the peak wavelength really being quite limited, and you'd need to go up to absurd temperatures to have a peak wavelength higher than like ultraviolet, for example. Right, but what is a black body? Because I've just said that's black body radiation. Well, a black body is what we can say is a star's a black body, but it's not really. It's very idealized. Everything's idealized in physics, but a black body is an idealized, perfect emitter and absorber of all frequencies of EM radiation. And this is a characteristic curve for a given temperature. So basically, as we've just shown, that any body at 6000 Kelvin will have that exact curve, right? Its intensity will be that value, obviously per size, but its intensity will be that exact shape, and it will be a proportion relative to another thing at 5000 Kelvin, right? So you'll always have that same characteristic curve. Particularly the peak value of the wavelength that's being emitted, that is defined by the temperature. You'll note that lambda max times T is a constant, and so for any given value of T you must have a fixed value of peak wavelength, regardless of what substance it is, regardless of what it is. Assuming it can be idealized as a black body, it does work. So we say that the radiation from stars is characterized in terms of an effective temperature, the temperature of a black body that would emit the same total flux of electromagnetic radiation. Now this falls down a little bit in that we know that stars aren't uniform in their temperature. They're not thermally equilibrium. They're not in thermal equilibrium with themselves. The core is much, much, much hotter than the surface. But we sort of generalize and say a star of about that temperature because this is the peak wavelength we're getting from it. It's hard to know whether that comes from the core or whether that comes from the surface because, you know, can't go messing with stars all the time.